Alright, Dad. We're live. So, first question I want to ask you is, what do you think of the Abarth? The Fiat Abarth?
As far as what?
As far as, like, the design-wise, speed, luxury.
Well, the luxury is zero. There is no luxury. It's hard riding, short wheelbase, more of a competition vehicle than it is luxury. And the design, it's a retro design from the 50s and 60s, so if you like retro, you'll like that. If you don't, well, you'll be confused. And as far as the performance goes, it's about as much fun as you could have with your clothes on at a price range of in the low 20,000 bracket. So
what would you give this car rating out of 10?
Oh, out of 10, I would give it a solid 7.5.
All right. So the next car I wanted to ask you about was the Lotus Esprit.
Well, here again, there's not much luxury, although they don't ride bad for an exotic car. That car handled and performed pretty much like a Formula Atlantic car, and it was kind of bare bones. And no power accessories, no power steering, no nothing. Power windows was the only option, and a stereo, and of course leather. But no power seats, no cruise control, just kind of a bare bones. But that car was very light, and it weighed about what the Fiat Abarth does, which is about 2,350 pounds. And with the 2.2 liter mid-engine turbo, with a huge turbocharger in that thing, in spite of it having such a big turbo, it didn't have any turbo lag, and it breathed through 40 millimeter Dell'Orto carburetors, and it was very fast, and it handled extremely well, and the styling was ultra exotic for the time.
All right, so now there's another Lotus I wanted to ask you about.
The Elise.
No.
Oh.
The Evora. The Lotus Evora.
Well, that car does have a bit more luxury, and it does have navigation and cruise control and power windows and power steering and power brakes, although the steering is still fully hydraulic and not electrical, which means it has a lot of steering feel to it, unlike a lot of the other exotic cars which are electric power steering, which have no feel. The performance is adequate for that car, which weighs just a little over 2,800 pounds. And with that Toyota V6, that's not quite 300 horsepower, the performance is adequate, but it doesn't have the acceleration or the top speed of any of the other exotic cars. But it also does not have a $200,000 plus price tag either, because you can buy a normally aspirated Evora, or you could at least, for $80,000, which is, less than half what you're paying for one of those other exotics. And you can always add things to it to increase the performance. They do have a computer for that now, and intake system and exhaust system. And the one that we have does have some exhaust modifications done to it with the active muffler, and it increased the performance considerably with the different fresh air intake. So I would say that car probably has around close to 300 horsepower now.
All right, and then we fast forward to 2017 or the end of 2016, where we have the Evora 400. So now, what would you say that to the old Evora?
Let me get a drink here.
Drinking eggnog.
Well, this Christmas. Well, the Evora 400 is basically the same thing as any of the older Evoras from 2010 on up. The major difference being it has the Edelbrock supercharger on it, which brings it up to 400 horsepower. And they also cut out a considerable amount of the door sills to make it easier to get in and out of. But other than that, and some interior changes to the instrument panel.
Sorry, I don't know that.
I know you don't. And
That thing over
just, you know, some modifications to the body, the fascias, the front and rear fascias, which are actually Lotus Evora GTEs from Europe. So that styling change is not anything new. It's something that's been around Europe for years. We just weren't able to get it here. And the performance is much better than the previous Evora, even the S, which was 345 horsepower. This car is 400, so it's obviously considerably more horsepower. And so the 0 to 60 time and quarter mile time are a lot quicker, and the top speed is fairly close to 200 miles an hour. But the Evora GT430 and the Evora 410 are better yet. Unfortunately, the Evora 410, which should be available as we're doing this now, does not have the 410 horsepower engine because they're not going to sell enough cars here to make the required EPA changes for emissions requirements. So it's still going to have the 400 horsepower Evora 400 engine, but it's going to have modifications of the suspension and some other things to lighten the weight up a little bit. So it would still be a worthwhile purchase over the Evora 400, especially if you're looking for more track performance. And the GT430, which they only made 80 of those, and as far as I know, they're all sold out already. But I don't know what they'll do next year. That would be the car because it's considerably lighter. It weighs around 2,300 pounds and 430 horsepower and a lot of interesting technological advances and lightweight glass, and they even went so far as to remove the Lotus plastic chrome emblems off of the rear fascia and replace it with tape because it's lighter, which that's really taking it to the extreme. That car is awesome. And absolutely the fastest street Lotus, production Lotus they've ever made. And I think in the highest horsepower as well.
So, in rating both of those cars, what would you give them both?
Well, you know, I haven't driven either one of those cars. What do you mean, the 410 or the 400? Which one?
The 400 in the Evora. The 400 in the Evora that we have.
Oh, the base Evora.
Yeah.
Well, I would rate the base Evora probably, you know, here again probably a solid 8. And mainly because the handling is so fantastic. The steering response is better than anything I've driven. And it's comfortable as well and quiet. And you could drive that car across country. And plus, you can get 30 mile per gallon plus on the highway with it, for an exotic car is unbelievable. And as far as the Evora 400 would go, I would probably say, you know, maybe an 8.5. I don't think it would be a much more than that, because basically the only thing you're going to get additionally is going to be some additional acceleration and a few mile per hour more top speed. And, you know, how important is that anyway? You know, but I find for my particular needs, it's easier to get out of this my older standard Evora than it is to get out of that, to get in and out of that 410, because it's minus, or the 400 rather, because it's minus a center armrest, so you could put some of your body weight on that to get you in and out of the car. So I find that, and also by eliminating some inches out of those side sills, the structural integrity, the rigidity is not as good as it is on the old car. So I don't think you're going to, and plus you've got wider wheels and tires and stickier tires, so that's going to mean you're going to be placing additional stress on that chassis because of the stickiness of the tires and the larger wheels and tires, but you don't have as good a structural integrity because of the loss of those dorsals. So that car potentially doesn't handle as well as the older one. So I would say 8.5.
All right. So I think we're gonna leave it there.
Okay.
So for next time there'll be, I think we'll just go over one car next time because it's probably going to be a pretty long one. It's going to be Saab, even though where we live, Saab, you can't buy a Saab anymore. We're going to be talking about the Saabs that we did have and how we like them. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. So, I'll see you guys in the next video.